Welcome back to Factual America, the channel where facts aren't just stated, they're investigated, debated, and sometimes reveal stories you're not supposed to hear. Today, we're tackling an issue that goes to the very heart of American freedom, your right to decide how your children are educated. I'm talking about what I call the war on homeschooling, why they want control of your kids. If you think this is just another parenting debate, think again. Powerful forces are at play behind the scenes, and by the end of this video, you'll see why homeschooling is at the center of a much larger battle for control. Let's start with a simple question. Why, in the land of the free, has homeschooling become controversial at all? For decades, homeschooling was seen as a niche practice. Quirky maybe, but harmless. Fast forward to today, and we're witnessing politicians, education bureaucrats, and activists all calling for tighter regulations, some even demanding outright bans. The question isn't just why now. It's what do they gain from controlling how you educate your own children? To answer that, we first need to look at how homeschooling has exploded in popularity. Did you know that before the pandemic, about 2.5 million American children were homeschooled? By 2021, that number doubled and has continued to rise. Why? When COVID hit and schools shuttered, parents had a front row seat to what their children were actually learning. Many weren't exactly thrilled. Parents saw curriculums pushing ideologies they didn't sign up for, chaotic Zoom classrooms, and a lack of academic rigor. For the first time, trust us where the experts didn't cut it anymore. Homeschooling wasn't just about escaping schools that were shut, it was about reclaiming the ability to teach values, history, and skills in line with your beliefs and your child's unique needs. So here's the first twist. Public school unions and many in government depend on your child being physically present in their schools. In most states, funding is tied directly to enrollment. Each student equals thousands of taxpayer dollars. When families pull their kids out, the money follows. And when enough families do this, unions lose bargaining power, districts lose cash, and the whole system gets rattled. But money isn't the only factor, there's also control. Think about it. Schools don't just teach reading and math, they shape culture, define norms, and increasingly push the latest social trends. Some call it education reform, but to many parents, it looks a lot like indoctrination. When parents homeschool, that influence is reduced, and that deeply worries those who believe education should remain firmly in the hands of central authority. In April 2020, Harvard Magazine published a now infamous article openly calling for a presumptive ban on homeschooling. Their argument? Homeschooling could allow parents to, get this, instill extreme religious views or restrict a child's access to a meaningful education. The author even suggested that the government should have the primary say in what every child learns. If you're wondering who gets to define meaningful, well, it certainly wasn't intended to be you or me. Let's pause. Is there a real-life risk here, or is this just a philosophical argument? It's very real. Some states are pushing for intrusive new regulations, thorough home inspections, surprise visits, mandatory government-approved curriculums, and even psychological screenings for homeschooling parents. It sounds dystopian, but in places like New York and California, it's not far off. Here's another twist. The attack on homeschooling isn't coming only from one side of the political aisle. While the most vocal critics tend to be left of center, remember that government overreach often thrives on bipartisan consensus. Some establishment Republicans are just as wary of families escaping the reach of official curriculum, worried that decentralized education could upset the carefully managed and often lucrative status quo. Who stands to lose if homeschooling expands? Unions see fewer dues and less power. School administrators lose funding. Curriculum companies tied to state contracts see their profits threatened. But most importantly, those who shape the cultural narrative lose one of their most powerful tools, the classroom. Homeschooling parents aren't just withdrawing their children, they're withdrawing their trust. They're saying, we're not buying what you're selling. And that's terrifying to anyone whose power rests on universal acceptance of their values, their priorities, and their version of history. But here's something you might not expect. Homeschooling, far from being a return to isolation, is actually fueling a wave of community innovation. Across the country, families are setting up learning pods, co-ops, and even microschools. Technology has made cooperative learning easier than ever. Suddenly, families are tailoring education to their children's interests, abilities, and values, and getting better results. How do we know it works? Academic studies show homeschoolers consistently outperform their public school peers on standardized tests, college admissions, and even in civic engagement. Colleges are seeking out homeschooled applicants for their independence and creativity. The claim that homeschooled kids are socially stunted, consistently debunked. The vast majority are more socially engaged through clubs, sports, church, and community service. But the pushback is intensifying. Just last year, lawmakers in multiple states introduced bills that would tie homeschoolers to public school curriculums, force registration, implement home visits, and in some cases, allow the state to override parental decisions on instruction. The most vocal advocates say it's for the children's safety, but the numbers don't lie. Child abuse rates among homeschoolers are significantly lower than in the general population. So what's the real motive? It's bigger than education. It's about deciding who gets to shape the next generation. If you control what kids learn, when they learn it, and how they learn to think, you control the future. That is power in its purest form. And that's why the war on homeschooling is, at its core, a war for your family's sovereignty. Let's look at history for a moment. Education didn't always mean massive government-run bureaucracies. For centuries, American families taught their kids at home or in small local schools, with a focus on basic literacy, civic virtue, practical skills, and religious values. It wasn't until the progressive era that we adopted a one-size-fits-all approach, ironically in the name of individual opportunity. But the bigger and more centralized the system got, the less responsive it became to parents' wishes and children's needs. Each new federal program promised equity and excellence, but too often delivered bureaucracy, mediocrity, and a loss of individual freedom. If parents buck the system pushes back. And here's the kicker. Across Western countries, governments are tightening the screws on homeschooling. Germany bans it outright. France, Sweden, and others are making it harder and harder. In the UK, local authorities now inspect homeschoolers at will and threaten fines if you resist. America's a holdout, but that could change overnight if we're not vigilant. Now I know what some people are thinking. What about the kids? Doesn't the government have a duty to make sure children are educated? Of course, we all want educated, capable citizens. But here's the truth you'll rarely hear. Parental rights are not collective property of the state. They are fundamental to our constitutional system. And when the state usurps those rights, history shows things rarely end well. No system is perfect. Yes, there are bad homeschooling parents, just as there are bad public school teachers and broken schools. That's not an argument for giving up your right to choose what's best for your child, any more than a few bad doctors justify abolishing private medical care. In a free society, diversity of approach, freedom to choose, is a strength, not a weakness. The ultimate question is this: who do you trust more? Your elected officials and appointed bureaucrats, or yourself, the person who knows and loves your child best? It's not rhetoric, it's reality. And if we ignore this battle, we risk losing more than just the right to homeschool. We risk losing the very principle that parents, not governments, are the primary guardians of their children. So what can you do? First, get informed. Laws are changing every year. Join local and national organizations defending parental rights. Talk with your neighbors. Volunteer at your school board. And above all, challenge the narrative that experts know best for your unique family. Here's a final twist. Homeschooling isn't a retreat from society. It's actually a bold stand for the foundational belief that ordinary Americans, not bureaucrats, are best equipped to build strong, prosperous families. In the end, that's what makes us different from societies where the state is all-powerful and the individual is just a number. Thank you for watching this episode of Factual America. What's your take? Should parents have the ultimate authority to educate their children as they see fit? Or should the government have the final say? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, give us your suggestions for future topics. What issues matter most to you and your family? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so we can keep bringing you the unfiltered stories that mainstream media tends to ignore. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and never stop asking questions.